silent. Anything said and can will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to talk to a lawyer and have them present with you while you're being questioned. If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, one will be appointed to represent you before any questionings if you wish. All right. You good, dude?
Today, I'm going to read through the Affidavit of Probable Cause for Kimberly Sue Park out of Wexford County, Michigan. This is a 3-page sworn statement from a Wexford County Sheriff's Office lieutenant asking the court for a warrant on charges related to lying to police, obstructing the investigation, and making false report of a felony in connection with the death of her sister, Rebecca Park. Before I start, everyone mentioned in this document is presumed innocent unless and until they're convicted in a court of law. The affidavit is law enforcement's side of the story, written to justify their charges. It's not a verdict. We haven't gone to trial yet, and it's not testimony. It's just the defense's version. Content warning also. This affidavit talks about the disappearance and death of a 38-week pregnant woman, alleged head trauma, discussions about cutting the baby out, and moving or hiding the body. I'm going to put the affidavit up on screen and read it from top to bottom, so let's get into it. The people of the state of Michigan, Wexford County Sheriff's Office versus Kimberly Sue Park. Date of birth 8/16 of 2004. The Affidavit of Probable Cause. Affiant, a duly sworn police officer with the Wexford County Sheriff's Office, attests to the following facts based on personal investigation, or is swearing to the facts as presented by a fellow sworn deputy sheriff, to establish probable cause that the crime of lying to police, obstructing an investigation, and making a false report of a felony was committed by the defendant, and affiant is respectfully seeking a warrant for the defendant's arrest. On Tuesday, November the 4th at 12:44, Kimberly Sue Park, white female, date of birth 8/16 of 2004, reported her 22-year-old sister, Rebecca K. Park, had not been seen since the prior evening. Kimberly identified that Rebecca was last known to be with Cortney Bartholomew at 30 South 21.5 Road, which is in Boone Township of Wexford County. Cortney Bartholomew is the biological mother to Rebecca and Kimberly Park. At the time of the report, Rebecca Park was 38 weeks pregnant and living with her boyfriend, Richard Falor. Kimberly Park provided the sheriff's office with a cellular telephone that was identified as the one that Rebecca had been using at the time of her disappearance. Kimberly Park was communicating information to Lieutenant Chris Pisker throughout the investigation. On Saturday, November 22nd, 2025, Kimberly Park made statements on a social media live broadcast that she was aware of information that Cortney Bartholomew and her husband, Brad Bartholomew, had something to do with Rebecca Park's disappearance. Lieutenant Pisker interviewed Kimberly Park on the same date, and she reported that Cortney and Brad had struck Rebecca Park in the head to cause her to have a seizure, and when they were unable to revive Park from the seizure, Brad contacted a friend who came and picked up Rebecca Park's body and took it away. Park said that Brad had said something about a swamp. During another interview with Kimberly Park on Monday, November 24th, 2025, Park told Sergeant Alicia Baxter that she was and has been in a romantic relationship with Richard Falor. Kimberly Park identified that her relationship with Falor was complicated by his relationship with her sister Rebecca. On Tuesday, November 25th, 2025, a body of a deceased woman was found off the Federal Forest Service Road 9784, which is, in a straight line, approximately 2.5 miles west of the Bartholomew residence. A tattoo above the left eye of the deceased person was consistent with a tattoo above the same eye of Rebecca Park. Park had sharp force trauma wounds to her neck, and her abdomen had been cut open. Sergeant Jamie Voss and Sergeant Olivia Whetstone met with Kimberly Park at her residence in Herring Township on November 25th, 2025 for a non-custodial interview based on the discovery of the body. During this interview, Kimberly Park discussed the relationship details between herself and Richard Falor. Park made a statement that Falor had told her that Rebecca had been taken care of and not to worry about it. Park went on to say that Falor had told her to lie to Lieutenant Pisker and say that Cortney and Brad Bartholomew hit Rebecca over the head and knocked her out, and they drove her and dumped her body. Kimberly Park was arrested for lying to police and obstructing the investigation at approximately 1911 by Sergeant Voss. Park told Sergeant Voss that she wanted to talk to Lieutenant Pisker. Lieutenant Pisker began a recorded interview with Kimberly Park on Tuesday, November 25th, 2025 at 2026. Park was provided with a Miranda warning, which she waived prior to the commencement of the interview. Kimberly Park identified that on Tuesday, November the 4th, 2025, while she was at Richard Falor's home, he told her that he killed Rebecca Park and that he wanted to protect Kimberly by not sharing details with her. Park identified that during a different conversation with Falor, He had told her that something went wrong while trying to cut the baby out of Rebecca. She reported that Falor told her that Austin Nolan had helped him with Rebecca. Park said that Falor had also been encouraging her to mislead the investigation, and it was the reason she was sharing misleading information on social media live broadcasts. Park told Lieutenant Pisker that Falor was becoming concerned about the investigation getting close to him, and that on the Thursday or Friday before Saturday, November 22nd, 2025, Falor assisted her with the creation of her accusation that she made to Lieutenant Pisker during the interview on that date. There appeared to be additional unsubstantiated knowledge that Park had about Rebecca. It included a statement about Rebecca possibly having been stored in an unknown location. Sergeant Dan Hackman arrested Richard Falor for open murder of Rebecca Park based on the statements made by Kimberly Park. Sergeant Voss and Sergeant Whetstone attempted to conduct an interview with Richard Falor at the sheriff's office on Wednesday, November 26, 2025, and he refused to cooperate without the assistance of an attorney. Lieutenant Pisker interviewed Austin Nolan on Wednesday, November 26, 2025. He denied involvement and was able to show cellular telephone records that did not place him in the Wexford County area on November 3rd or 4th, 2025. Nolan cooperated with a consent search of his cellular device and later a consent search of his black in color Chevrolet Malibu. Nolan did confirm that he had previously been in romantic relationships with both Rebecca and Kimberly Park. On Wednesday, November 26, 2025, Lieutenant Pisker and Sergeant Hackman began a follow-up interview with Kimberly Park and were more confrontational with her based on the outcome of the interview with Nolan. Park requested the assistance of an attorney, at which point the interview was terminated. All right, so that is the full affidavit of the probable cause for Kimberly Sue Park. This document lays out three main things. Kimberly, as the person who first reported Rebecca missing and stayed in contact with investigators. Kimberly going live on social media and accusing Cortney and Brad of knocking Rebecca out and having her body taken away to a swamp. And then Kimberly telling detectives that Richard Falor admitted to killing Rebecca, talked about something going wrong while trying to cut the baby out, and allegedly pushed her to mislead the investigation and create that earlier story about Cortney and Brad. The state is using all of that to say there's probable cause that Kimberly lied to detectives, obstructed their work, and made a false felony report during an active murder investigation. Before I close this out, I want to give you a really quick update on where the case stands as of today, because things have moved a little bit since the affidavit was filed. First, for Cortney and Bradly Bartholomew, nothing has changed on their charges. They're still facing the first-degree premeditated murder, felony murder, torture, the pregnancy-related assault charges, unlawful imprisonment, and removal of a body. They're both still being held without bond, and their next big court date is currently set for January the 13th, while the lawyers work through the discovery. For Kimberly Sue Park, the woman whose affidavit we just read, she's out on a much lower bond than she started with and is on conditions, but she is still charged with tampering with evidence, lying to police during a violent crime investigation, and making a false felony report. For Richard Falor, Rebecca's fiancé, he now has two separate criminal tracks. He's been bound over to the circuit court on the meth delivery case, and he's also picked up a new domestic violence charge, with both of those matters currently pointed at early January court dates. So even though he's not charged in Rebecca's murder directly, he's still very much in the system on serious, unrelated charges. And finally, the question everyone is still asking, as of the latest information available, the baby still has not been found. Law enforcement and the Attorney General's office are still describing the baby as missing, and that piece of this case still remains painfully unresolved. If you made it this far into the video, I appreciate you more than you know. If you'd like, make sure you're subscribed, notifications are on, and tell me in the comments what cases you've been keeping up with. As always, thanks for hanging with Hio.